Cue the intro.
Oh, shoot. It's yours.
Whose world is this? It's mine, it's mine, it's mine. Whose world is this?
Till I'm charged to writing.
What's up, everybody? It's the MulTYversed. I'm Ty Bricks, and I'm here with my cohorts, Miss Holly Noon, Mr. Tyrone Thornhill, and our special guest this week, the real Vince Taylor. So everybody give a big round of applause for our guest of the day.
Well, I gotta say, man, this is a big get, man. For y'all to get me on this show, yo. Kudos to y'all, man, and thank you. But the Cash App ain't cleared yet, so I'm still waiting. We'll see how long I'm here.
Well, you will be waiting, so don't hold it down. But it's great to have you here, man. We got some really good topics to talk about in a very short time. We are supposed to have another special guest. He has not arrived yet, but I'm sure he will be arriving soon. But let's jump into it, man, because we don't have that much time. So let's jump right into it. First things first, man. We want to get into critical race theory. And before we get into that, we need to know what critical race theory is. So I want to go around the panel and hear everybody's definition or idea of what critical race theory is. And please don't do the Wikipedia version. I want to hear what everybody thinks critical race theory is. So we'll start with you first, Holly Noon.
So my understanding of critical race theory is it's only taught in law school, and that's kind of where I learned it from, like kind of higher education. And basically it's how you connect the history of the United States and how we have institutions and policies that perpetuate racism in America. And so that's kind of how I understood it, was just you examine history and how it's kind of created the systematic policies that perpetuate racism against people of color. That's kind of how I understand it.
Okay. What about you, Vince?
Well, it seems like CRT is like Republican repellent, because basically anytime you put it in the air, they get so excited, because it's one of those things that if you put up a column, you have your tribes, and then you get the left and the right. The right now, their tribe is basically going up against anything that could potentially even the stakes between the races, because in their mind, as long as you forget it, it's behind you, don't worry about it. But CRT is an attempt to start from a certain grade level or a certain educational level to, instead of just hope that we can do things from the outset after you're 60, 70, to say, well, look, this is the mentality you should have as you go into life. And here's the reason why so many people of color are so upset about so many things that you're blind to. These are the type of things that are discussed at the kitchen table with most people of color that are not necessarily discussed in the kitchen tables of suburbia, of many homes in suburbia. So what I feel it is, because you did ask what our own opinion was, I feel that it is a way to combat the ignorance that we have basically thrived in over the course of these years that lead up to incidents like January 6th and the 9 people shot in South Carolina and in the church. And all of these different atrocities that we seem to just say, look, let's just get past it, kumbaya, this, that, and the third. It actually deserves some more further education at a younger level, so that you don't grow up with these same, mentalities. Is my opinion.
Okay. How about you, Tyrone? Unmute yourself.
You should have heard what I just said. It was amazing, and I can't repeat it because I don't even remember it. So I'll give my opinion because I'm sure we'll hear the actual definition. But for me, my summary of it, my feelings on it is it's a way to teach an accurate version of history up to today that shines light on the way things were instead of just the way we want to believe that they were, which will shine some unfortunate light on some hard truths for people to swallow. I think that's why we end up with these discussions. But critical race theory is based in accuracy and based in data and based in history. So yeah, that's okay. That's my take.
We have just been joined by Mr. Deshion Brown. Do me a favor, Deshion, and turn your camera horizontal so we can get the full picture of you, if you could. There you go. There we go, my man. All right.
That's it. What's good?
That's it. There we go, my man. All right, it's good to have you on the show. You know what I'm saying? I would give you the whole big round of applause, but you're late. But listen. I'm gonna let you have an opportunity to answer the same question I gave everybody else. And in your own words, what is critical race theory to you?
I think it's critical race theory. I think it has the possibility to be a good thing. I think this is just another medium for them to control the narrative.
And who is them?
You know, I think it can be a very good thing for us, especially in this country. But,
okay, when you say them, who is
like
them?
I said, they try to control the narrative. It's the system, of course.
All right.
The system is just another way. For example, For example, times and dates that certain things happen, they'll kind of shorten up times and dates, and they won't really give you a real accurate account of what's going on. Just to control the narrative, basically.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Vince. You had a question?
I'm just, at the age that I am right now, I get real leery about variables. You know what I'm saying? And real leery about, things that are ambiguous, and these they and these them. So I'm hoping that we could specify who these they and them are, and we could also specify what the narrative was before CRT came into place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's fair. That's a fair enough assessment. That's fine. And I agree. I'm gonna, since everybody's actually
there was no narrative.
Okay. Now since everybody's had an opportunity to say what they think it is, I'm gonna give the actual Wikipedia definition of what it is, and see how that lines up with what we believe it is. The Wikipedia definition of critical race theory is a body of legal scholarship and an academic movement of U.S. civil rights scholars and activists who seek to examine the intersection of race and U.S. law and to challenge mainstream American liberal approaches to racial justice. When I hear that definition, just sounds like a bunch of big words and a lot of, dolled up stuff. But in essence, one of the things, and I love the fact that we have these opportunities to have these discussions amongst each other to bring up these topics for the audience and people out there to understand where we come from, and maybe talk about some of the things that they feel as well. One of the things that I stated when we first started about this was, I think there's an important dynamic here. Instead of critical race theory, I think it's we should more as Black people focus on the critical race purification side of it. And that part of it for me is clearing up what our history actually is. That's where it starts. Because if we're going into critical race theory by saying that our history is that of just the slave aspect of it, which again, I when we were talking about this, I said, I think being Black slaves in America is a part of the journey, but the part that preluded that, or came before that, is the part that Black people in America don't necessarily have any inclination of their actual cultures and their actual history that predated American slavery. And I think if you're going to teach your kids history and not include the origin, then I think you're doing a disservice to your children and Black people and in a whole, because and I got you, Vince, and in a whole, because in essence, how is it that you can teach Black people about themselves if you don't have any inclination of what self means, and what that encompasses? Vince, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I agree with you, and I also think that it does unfortunately because we know we can't depend on the whole community always. Like they say, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. But unfortunately, it takes some incumbents upon ourselves to reach out and teach ourselves some more about our ancestry, because it's not, when we go to school, they don't tell little Susie Q that she was born in Ireland, you know what I'm saying? And that she, you know, her people used to blow bagpipes, you know, and they used to hook up at a fjord and was Vikings and stuff. They do tell you about Ireland existing. And unfortunately, after that, it's the family's job, at least as far as it is this far, to delve into where their history is. The unfortunate downside of that is that Black people as a whole, because of the way we were brought over to the country, don't have any idea of where our ancestry is as a result of the history of the United States. So even though we like to say slavery did not actually define our history, it interrupted it, it still unfortunately is United States history as how we got here. And that's how a lot of it ends up being taught in school. So that's why we was hoping
that's
that
a falsehood too.
What was that?
That's a falsehood also.
Absolutely.
That's a falsehood and how we got here. You know, that's not the truth. You know, that's not how we got here. That's the story predicated that they put on us to make us believe that this is how we got here. This is the land that we are indigenous to. Prior to slavery, we were already here.
But I haven't.
The Native Indian, the so-called Native Indian, is us.
Well, listen, we are the world. Brown people, we're all brown people. But in terms of Africans, it is undeniable that there is a huge influx during the transatlantic slave trade of Africans being brought over to the United States. Now, if you want to go in terms of Blacks,
where do you get that information from?
And it's not even the United States. It's they came to the whole entire continent. These aren't people that are going. Listen. The entire Spanish Inquisition, everybody, the conquistadors, they didn't come over here and start in addition to the folks that in the United States were as indigenous, were taken from their own tribes and forced to be slaves. There are also folks south of our Mexican border, south of our American border. So he's right that Black people did exist. There's plenty of evidence. If you read the book, They Came Before Columbus, it speaks about the artifacts, and you can talk about the different please forgive my mom because I smoked a little bit earlier today. Don't tell my mom.
But I'll help you out with that real quick. Because
there were monuments that are very similar in both continents.
Well, I just want to help you out there because for anybody who's watching this, and I want them to have an opportunity to go read this stuff for themselves and go look this stuff up for themselves, because this is kind of the whole purpose of the show. The book that you're referring to is called They Came Before Columbus, The African Presence in Ancient America. Yes. It was written by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. This is a book by Ivan Van Sertima. So this is a book that you can go and purchase and read for yourself, but it does discuss the fact that Black people have been here mostly in Central and South America. There were 90% of the Black people that came over here prior to the transatlantic and Atlantic trade were brought over to the Central and South American continents of the Americas. So the migration of those people in the United States, they were here prior to the transatlantic slave trade. So that to Deshion's point, that because you brought up the transatlantic slave trade, and he's just saying that they were here, that Black people are indigenous to this area because they were here prior to them coming over as slaves.
Let me make two real quick statements, my man. Yes. And just so you know, my brother Deshion, it's a pleasure to be on the panel with you, man. And I'm absorbing all the education that you're breathing through. I think that there comes sometimes a point in which we try to make an either or, and I don't think that that's an instance. In this instance, there's an either and. We were here in advance, and we were brought over here as well. It doesn't have to be one or the other, because we weren't always defined as Black. That is a concept that was given to us by Europeans. So prior to the definition of being called Black, through what Richard Blumenbach defined as the black, white, red, yellow, and the black, white, red, and yellow races, we actually did exist in terms of the hue of which we were in. But in terms of the African nationality of which I'm speaking of coming directly from Africa, that's what I'm talking about in terms of the transatlantic slave trade.
Well, let me speak to that, because again, this is the point of the show, was we were going to do fact checking and everything like that. To speak to that point, if we're talking like that, we're all from Africa, because the first people to ever actually be the first place that people all originated from, and this is through archaeology, anthropology, all of those things
Lucy.
like that, was actually North Africa, northeast and southwest Africa. So these places in Africa where all people originated. So if we are saying African, all people are African. And
all right, hey, let me interrupt.
No, but I'm just I know. No, but this is why I said have documentation, because we can spew opinions all day, but at the end of the day, facts override opinion. And so what I'm saying, the fact of the matter is all people originated from Africa, all, because the first known instances in anthropology to find where people originated.
He mentioned Lucy.
Archaeology.
Yeah, archaeology, rather.
Yeah, all people were descended from what we consider modern day Africa. Africa didn't exist then. It was kind of a different situation globally, geographically, and that sort of thing.
No one had mapped the lands.
Right. Yeah. You know, so it's like
that region. That region. Yes, you're right.
Well, I mean, can we also consider the unknowns? All right.
Well,
first of all,
you say consider the unknowns. Now, this is kind of why we're in the situation we're in right now. Is because we've allowed the unknowns to guide us in a lot with the belief systems, with different things that cause us to have this conversation. Is where the unknowns came from. We're speaking like this show in particular. I want us to focus on what we can prove, not what we assume or what we think could have happened. So when you say unknowns, you are jumping right back into that place of not talking about factual evidence that we have, as opposed to what we don't know or what we assume to be.
Well, the facts would state in this instance exactly what you said, which is that one of the oldest known human skeletal systems was found in Africa, was found to be a darker skinned Black woman. They called her Lucy, you know, and there have been some research as of late as to whether or not that's actually the oldest one up to date. But my point is, despite the fact that we have that evidence, it doesn't negate the possibility that in the entire world that we live on, there aren't any other artifacts that are dated prior to that. Now, I don't say that to discount what we believe, because I believe that we all do come from Africa. But I do think we get real convoluted when we start calling everybody Africans. You know what I'm saying? Like when we start calling, so do all white people get reparations? Because we all did come from Africa. You know what I'm saying? Like we got to have at some point in time the historical aspect of it, into which we were divided, and these racial caste systems does apply. So it's really weird to just be like, yo, look, man, we all Africans, when we know that that's not how we all identify. You know what I'm saying? Even though that's where we all originated from.
Yeah, you're absolutely, and I can't knock you for that, because you're absolutely right. But then we go into categorizations, which basically is something that we created. We created categories as a people. We decided that in order for this person to exist or this person to exist, that we needed to categorize where they're from, what they are, things like that. And that's what kind of got into the whole racial divide. You know what I'm saying? Is that this person is this?
We didn't do it.
Right.
I was about to say,
yeah, that was a European invention. Yeah.
Well, look, no. I'm not saying who did it or didn't. But I'm glad you alluded. I'm glad you alluded to that, Deshion, is that it wasn't a European construct, as most things in Western civilization are. But what I wanted to just focus on is the fact that these are what causes division, is the fact of categorization. Whenever you categorize something into one set, then you now have to do the same for another set. And so that's why when I say we're all from Africa, I'm just saying that the origin of man as it pertains to history is that all human life as far as what they have found thus far shows that we all originate from.
Let me show you where that gets tricky, Ty. First of all, we didn't. I mean, just because race was invented doesn't mean that there weren't divisions well before that. I mean, even in the biblical days, you know, there were the Gentiles and the Jews. There were pagans and the monotheists. So there's always a way to decide people. In my opinion, if you actually took race away, then people would end up being divided on their eye color or their hair color. So there's always a way to divide folks. But where it gets tricky is not
Gentiles and Jews and pagans. That's still a European construct.
It is.
Fair enough.
That came along with Europe.
The Bible as a history book.
None of that got nothing to do with my point. My point is the fact that those are still ways of categorizing people that don't involve race. So you can call them European all you want to. They existed prior to the United States concept of racial caste system that we have. But my point is, if let's go by what you know, all right? Because if I understand, there was supposed to be some religion discussed in this debate, in this discussion as well. So if Lucy is on record, the very first person that exists in Africa, does that make Lucy Eve? If not, then who the fuck? And please forgive my language. Sorry, Mom. I know I told you to tune in.
Yeah, yes, what's up, bro?
Well, again, you're using the Bible as a history book. And making that seem as though because it's written, it's so. My man, and that's why we're having this discussion today, is because we're going based on what we know, not what we think we know. And you know,
or believe.
Deshaun,
I tried to get you.
I know you did. But Deshaun, I brought you on the show specifically for comments like that, because me and you have these discussions and have had these discussions for years. And I thought that there would be no one better to talk about this. And I was going to wait till a little later in the show to get into that. But thank you for that, Vince. We'll get into religion right now. We'll just jump into Segway champ. So
that's easy. The whole religion thing, when it comes to facts, anyway. Go ahead. So.
No. I was just basically going to give you the floor and let you go ahead.
The whole religion thing, when it comes to facts, is that we didn't consider it religion. You know, before Christianity, the Muslim religion, it was Islam, and the Jewish faith, it was just a way of life. The European, the Southeast Asian, they came in and they named it. They put a name on it. They created all of these different sects, so to speak. You know, they called it Christianity. You know, most of the people, you know, if you know anything about the religion, that Christianity began in Ethiopia. It was a way of life for these people. It wasn't a religion. You know, a lot of these religions are the handmaiden of conquerors. You know, to quote my hero John Henry Clark. You know, and we didn't worship it. These were ways of life and how we live, and you know, in coordinates with nature, like Maya. You know, we lived in balance with nature and with each other. You know, these religions, they're like I said, we Africans, because I still consider myself an African.
So
even though my grandparents are native to this country.
Are you saying the entire continent of Africa, subscribe to the same religion?
Well,
the same way of life?
It wasn't. Did you get what I said? It was. Exactly. It wasn't about religion back then. Those people in those times, if you look up, you know, I'm trying to be factual. If you look up, oh man, look, I don't have my pad with me. I'm at work. Excuse me. Man, Sheikh Anta Diop, he wrote something. I can't think of it. But you look at the times that we're talking about. If you look at history as a timeline, and your arm is all of history, what we know is from your wrist to your fingertips. Everything before then, we have no idea about. But we do have some scholars who have studied some of these situations. And the situation is what I'm trying to explain is that religion wasn't a thing. Religion was, like I said, a handmaiden of conquerors. We've had ways of life where we worked we work closely along with nature and each other. It wasn't a religion. We had monotheistic understanding,
right?
But it still was about working in collusion with each other. Yeah.
Go ahead, Vince.
Well, I think that what we're doing right now is we're parsing over definitions and we're parsing over words. I think that religion, if you look it up in Wikipedia or even in Webster's dictionary, it's synonymous with tradition. So religion in itself doesn't always necessarily, as it's described to us as we've been indoctrinated, signify worship of someone. Religion also embodies the pagan tribes that used to exist that are spoken of. I know we don't believe in the Bible, but they're spoken of in the Bible, so you can assume that they did exist well before the transatlantic slave trade. So these are things that were well set in place. And we even just discuss, if we like to talk about, if we talk about the Torah, let's talk about the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers. We can talk about the fact that in Exodus, one of the reasons why Moses was so struck and had to revolt and rise up to free his Hebrew people is because that he saw that it was religious policy that was giving Pharaoh the right to persecute them, which is ultimately what made him go into the Mount Sinai and look for that burning bush and free his people. Because religious, even if we don't call them religion, let's call them ways of life.
That's a falsehood too. That's folklore. That's folklore, God.
Hold on. If you listen to what I said as it's spoke of in the Bible. Now you can debate whether the Bible says, but I'm just telling what says in the Bible. Whether it happened or not, my DeLorean is broke, so I can't go back in time to tell you whether it happened or not. But what it says in the Bible is that there were systems in place. It speaks plenty of times about pagans, falsehoods, false gods, all of which did exist. There's even one of my favorite parables is Moses when he finally gets woke, right? And he's like, nah, hold the fuck. Y'all just gonna kill off all my people? That's one of me. He gets woke and comes down and he brings a staff to the Pharaoh. And he's like, yo, bro, if you don't let my people go, my God gonna rain down on you, homeboy. Like, we gonna look, watch this. I'm gonna turn this whole stick into a snake. Pow. And Pharaoh was like, yawn. My people could do that too. His own people had their own stakes. The reason I bring this up is because it shows that even back then, even in what was described in the scripture, we can debate the validity of it. But
no. I got to stop you because that was the whole point of the show. We're not going to debate the validity of anything. What we're going to do today is we're going to go based on what historical proof can prove. What we do know is that historically, there is no proof that Moses ever existed, period. And this is something that historians have gone over and over and over. There is no proof that he existed. There is no proof. There's no proof. So the idea that Moses wrote a book when there's no proof that he ever existed, we can't use the 5 books that he supposedly wrote if he never existed and there's no proof that he ever existed. But yet there is proof that there was a Cleopatra. There is proof that there was a Ptolemy. There is proof of other people existing in these times. So when we start to talk, and this is why we need to have these discussions, is because a lot of times what people do, especially Black people, is they use the Bible as a history book, and then when you go and you conflict with what they believe in, then they say, well, we won't debate whether it's real or not. That's not how you have a discussion. You don't deal in whether or not it was real or not, and then use that as a fallback when it doesn't set up to what you believe in. I'm not sitting here again debating, like you said, the validity of a book. I'm here to bring facts where this discussion needs to be, where we're going to talk about these things. So if you have documentation or some type, because I said this from everybody in the panel, if you have some resource material that can back up what you're saying, then we will talk about it all day. But what I want to do is get Black people, and not just Black people, but people, to understand that when you have these, you have the accessibility to the internet, which you did not have 30, 40, 50 years ago. You know what I'm saying? It's different when you're having these discussions. Go ahead, Tyrone.
Oh, I got a question that might help to get some context, and maybe we could share some knowledge with listeners and watchers. But when you say there's no proof that Moses exists, yeah, that's true. And then but there's proof that Cleopatra exists, and that also absolutely true. But then where do we go from there? Like what do we do with that information? How do we use it to better our understanding of our history? Because right now we're talking in very nebulous terms. We're talking very big picture stuff. But what can somebody do at that point if they're like, all right, well, I want to, I feel more connection to, to North African culture, Egyptian culture, whatever it may be. What then?
Well, as it pertains to this conversation, if you're going to talk about, if you're going to go ahead. What did you have something to say, Deshaun?
Go ahead, go. You finish up.
Oh, I was going to say, as it pertains to this discussion.
Finish up. Go ahead, go. I'm listening.
I think we got like a slight delay or whatever, but basically what I'm saying is, if we're going to have a constructive conversation about how, because the whole reason we're having this is how to educate our youth moving forward. And if we're going to talk about history and we want them to understand their true history, then we can't talk about stuff that has no validity when it comes to historical content, which is typically how we do our research and find truths in situations. Like with the Bible in itself, like Vince, we've talked about this plenty of times. I was raised Christian just like you were. Like my mother, my grandmother, they were headstrong on teaching the religion to me and getting me to access that part of the doctrine. But as I got older, and as I became more acclimated to internet and resources, I started to do my research. And in the midst of doing my research, I found a lot of holes, just like you have. You found a lot of holes as well. But what I'm saying is, when you bring up these 5 books and the story of Moses, the only reason I stopped you is because there's no historical evidence that he existed. So if you're using those 5 books, and that was your scenario and that you were talking about, you mentioned Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Then you started talking about a story of what he said in the book. But if he didn't exist or doesn't, if there's no proof that he exists,
I don't think that's something. It's hard to disprove. Like, I can say to you, do you know that there's a baby unicorn inside your head right now? Like, prove me wrong. You know what I'm saying? I can say that there is an animal on Mars as we speak. Like what is it that Neil deGrasse Tyson says? He says the absence of evidence is not necessarily the what you know the word, the saying I'm trying to say, like the absence. Say it. I think Deshaun
the evidence of absence.
Yes.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
My quoting the Bible is not me trying to validate the existence of Moses, but it is including some of the excerpts from this Bible that some would use for historical references in order to solidify the possibility that these
it's just social engineering at its best, man.
Well, listen, we can talk about social engineering. I feel like somehow
I
ended up on the arguing side of the Bible, and I did not come on here to get nobody to come to the altar. Like, that's not what I did. I don't choose yes or I don't choose one or another theory. I like to have the embodiment of all bits of knowledge for this.
Okay, go ahead, Holly.
I was just saying that basically.
Hold on, Deshaun. Hold on one moment. Go ahead, Holly.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I thought we were gonna start with like kind of the history of Africa, and that long before the slave trade, we were actually a thriving civilization, like kings and queens, and we had, we were doctors and lawyers, and like that's what I thought. Honestly, how this conversation was gonna start.
I'm gonna keep it real.
We were gonna educate people, like the young people who probably would come across us, just to say like, yo, like we had empires in Ghana, Mali, like I'm just saying, like. Yeah, like we had all these empires, and like, because what I feel like gets translated now and is perpetuated is like we kind of had to start over and become like doctors and lawyers after like the slavery ended, when that's not true. When like in Africa, we were doctors, we had occupations. How do you think these white people, why do you think they use us to nurse their children and take care of their house and do the agriculture for them? Where do you think that comes from? Because they saw us growing rice, and they saw how we were moving over in Africa, and they took it. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, people don't realize, like, we were very self-sufficient. We were very successful for many, like, for decades, before hundreds of years.
Thank you for bringing that up, Holly, because that is exactly what the point of this discussion was to inform Black people that the slave history that they have been told is their history is just a part of the journey. And the fact, and one of the things that I said in the beginning of this, and you kind of alluded to it, Vince, was the replacement of this history for another. And that's what I'm saying is, like, if we're going to do critical race theory, but the history that we teach our kids is that they all are descendants of slaves, and not teach them the side of history that came before the slaves. That's the part that really ruffles my feathers, because we're still teaching our young Black children, and even older Black people who have convinced themselves that this is our history, that we were way more than what we're depicted as. And that part for me is, religion has been used to brainwash us a lot of times into what you were talking about just a little while ago, which is believing in something without actual evidence. So, like, the notion that I can believe because I don't know is not really constructive to what we're trying to do. Like, that's what we've been doing, is believing in stuff that we can't prove to be true. So, like, I tried to bring everybody on here to bring facts to the table.
Social engineering.
Holly, you just brought up
social engineering.
All factual information. That was all factual information you just brought up, and I applaud you for that. Yeah, Vince, if you want to kind of go on and talk a little bit more, I'll give you the floor and allow you to do that.
Listen, as you may or may not know, I'm an instructor for Black History for the Black History Project. We do literally what we're doing right now, 4 high school kids, so that they won't be struck only knowing Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King at the end of their high school tenure. But having said that, I like to make sure these kids know that we were kings and queens. We were Osiris. We were Heru, Horus. We were Nefertiti. We definitely in Alexandria. We taught the Greeks how to use astronomy for sailing purposes. We're the reason why there was an explorational error when it comes to people actually trying to find this new continent, which wasn't really new, because we all already knew that. But at the same time, a lot of us was kings and queens, but some of us was just niggas, yo. Somebody had to get the water. Like, somebody had to just watch the kids. There was a babysitter back in Kemet. You know what I'm saying? Somebody had. There was everybody. We couldn't all the kings and the queens. The kings and queens.
Niggas. No, we weren't niggas.
Well, forgive me, homeboy. Hold on, calm down. I'm intersecting my intellectuality with my nigga mentality as I I'm a comedian. I do comedy too. Oh my God! I'm just playing, my nigga. Calm the fuck down.
I know, nigga.
This thing, are you explaining to me right now? I'm trying to make a fucking joke. You trying to yo? Please don't use it.
There's importance there. This show means a lot to me. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I feel like this is our opportunity to speak to the people that
was niggas. Okay, we was niggas. Okay, we was royalty over there.
Social media is gonna ban this conference. This
probably going down.
All right. I made Deshion sit up in his chair, yo. My bad. I was just playing, bro. I didn't mean to make. He was comfortable as hell before, and I said niggas, and he was like, "Hold up, man. Let me put on my comfortable." He done leaned forward. I ain't want no problems, bro. I don't keep no cash in the register, boy. I don't want no problems. All I'm saying is, listen. I'm gonna say 2 things real quick. One, I will say to y'all, and the other I'll say to my kids. Exactly what Holly says is what I say to our students. Listen, guys, look up you will find that there's a whole host. And Africa is the biggest continent of all 7 continents. So you're going to find that you're going to have a plethora, an infinite amount of royalty to look up. And you belong to that royalty as a black man, as a black woman. But deep inside, I also know somebody had to watch the goats. Somebody had to tend to the lambs. There were shepherds. And despite the fact that we were kings, the only reason I say that is because I don't want anybody that's in my class to think that if they don't rise to that king level, to that presidential, to that level, that they still aren't significant. So we all had a hand in what it is that we became. And so sometimes that involves, being somebody who lifts the bricks and not the one who commands folks to lift the bricks.
I think you're making a great point. I think that is
definitely a good follower to be a good leader.
I definitely can agree with that, and I don't find any fault in what you're saying. And it is important that we let kids know that it's okay to to live in it, but it's okay to be mediocre, but not to be less than. You get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, like, Holly, I didn't like that either.
No. What I'm saying, in essence, what I'm saying is, if you have an occupation that pays your bills and takes care of you and your family, it's okay to not be a baller. It's okay to not be a superstar. It's okay not to be an NBA. It's okay to not do that, because everybody's not going to be that. So, yeah. but what I
look at us, we ain't shit either.
Whatever. But my point is, when you tell kids and you show kids, pictures like this depicting us like this, which is what you see in history books. When you start seeing things like that, where we look like animals, where we look like we came from the bottom, and we have such a far way to come up.
Well, it's social engineering, huh? This is social engineering. America, from the perspective of colonizer.
Well, I would ask a question. I would ask a question that when you do get to the point of our history that undeniably takes place in America that has enslaved Africans. How do you teach that to kids at that point? Like, what do you teach them at that point? What does it look like? You know what I mean? And I think with critical race theory, the whole idea is to teach the ugliest version of the truth, is to teach the realest version of the truth, minus any kind of fluff to make America look better or anything like that. It's like, hey, these are the atrocities that were committed that put us on a path where social constructs will continue to oppress an entire people. And while there have been some strides, there have been some of that incremental change that they talk about with white liberals and stuff, kind of leading that charge and stuff like that, and the civil rights movement. There has been some change, but these constructs are still to this day oppressing people, and I think that's what critical race theory wants to teach. So I guess the question after all that is just, what does it look like if we don't teach, those atrocities?
But see, I think to answer your question, I never said not to teach it. What I said was it's part of the journey, not the origin. And if you teach just part of the journey and leave out the origin, to go back to your point, Vince, where you said that, Irish kids, can go home and yeah, they can, because their history wasn't stolen from them and they have access to it through family members and so on and so forth. But when your history has been stolen and replaced with a history that shows you being depicted as a slave, and that's where you come from, your origin story starts at slavedom, then that's where I'm saying I have the problem. You have to incorporate all of the history and not some of the history, because you're trying to correct America's atrocities. This is not about America. This is about us as Black people finding where we come from and knowing.
Right. But what I'm saying is, I'm asking for, like, what does it look like though? And like, because I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I'm saying, what does it look like? What is the alternative, and how can we start to move that? How can we, instead of just sitting here like, hey, this needs to change, like, what are some of the things that maybe we could do to start the change?
Incorporate the whole story. And that's what
right. Right. And what is that like? Yeah. So do we add African studies? Because we've been cut off very intentionally from that knowledge familially, right? Like the records weren't kept for us. So like, we can't go back to the family and be like, hey, tell me about where we come from in Africa. You know what I mean? We can't do that. It's just, or most of us can't do that. So what does it look like to fill in that knowledge? What's up, Vince?
Well, let me first of all, the records are still in existence. It's just that, I mean, there are records that exist.
There are some records.
We don't exist as people. We exist as property. And you'll find the receipts for many of our people. And that's how some folks were able to connect with their tribes back in the homeland. But in the other instance, I think that what Tyrone is saying is that at some point in time, if you're teaching U.S. history, right, not world history, all right, not plain old non-descriptive history, but if you're teaching U.S. history, they're probably not going to go with the Deshion Brown thesis of, yo, look, Black people was here already. It should be done like that. That's the way it should be. It should be like, listen, these folks were here ahead of time, and there were versions of Africans that were here in existence prior to the U.S. being here. In addition to those folks that were here, we also went over and, and threw a bunch of folks on a boat, purchased them, kidnapped them, did all this in the third. In addition to those that lived here already, there were also a conglomerate of folks that came from different countries than the United States. But once they got here, here is what United States history preaches as what happened since the point that they got. Because remember, the United States is only almost 200 years old. You know what I'm saying? A little over 200 years old. So that's the history that they're portraying. There are books. I mean, I don't know. I think we got a pretty educated panel here, but in all of my African-American studies classes, they didn't start at the transatlantic slave trade. And they did speak about continents in Africa in which folks, I know it's generic, but Shaka Zulu and a lot of other, like the Maui, the whole Mau Mau situation was crazy. But there's a whole bunch of things that were discussed in different courses. So I'm saying, United States history is going to be different from the other history courses. Is all I think Tyrone was saying.
Oh, I know exactly what he was saying.
But like I was saying, this is social engineering at its best, bro. You can go and get your master's, you can go get your doctorate, you can do all of that and not know nothing about African history. Not take one course about Africa at all. But they'll tell you that stuff like Sigmund Freud is the father of psychology, which he learned and studied at the University of Africa. They'll tell you that you got to take Hippocrates, the Hippocratic Oath when you're a doctor, when Imhotep is the father of medicine. You know what I mean? It's up to, they'll tell you whatever they want, man. Anything that white people do is basically for white colonialism. It's to profit and to make them better. That's it. It's not for anybody else. So they're not going to teach you what you need to know. They're not going to give you the things you need to learn to prosper, and especially to beat them. It's not going to work. It's never going to happen.
Here's the question. The question is,
I don't get theory. How is it a theory if these are the facts? But they're never going to teach you what you need to know to win. We us what we need to know, and you can put this stuff in the schools or whatever. It's still going to be slided to their side, no matter what. You're not going to learn about Hup Shut Shut. You're not going to learn about none of our people. We're going to have to teach our people. These are things, like Ty said, the internet is full of information. We're going to have to search for this information to get this information so we can give it to our kids. We got to, we got to do it. It's up to us.
I want to recommend that, man, what a perfect place to.
Go ahead.
Was that a mic drop?
Definitely a mic drop.
I want to recommend that folks don't just. I mean, I've heard the internet reference without any specific reference points multiple times this entire show, and I just want to say, in addition to just Googling stuff, I want to highly recommend you actually read the book, research the author, research exactly who the author is, so you can know what or how reliable that source is. I love some of the best authors you probably don't know about. But if you go out there and just like Frances Welsing is one of my favorite authors, and she speaks about the ISIS and the keys to the colors. And I like a lot of different authors. The internet, I would say, is not the best as a general sense source of information, because you could end up on Reddit and be listening to some coked up, spewed up, you know what I'm saying, weed head who's sitting there and let's tell him what comes to his mind with no references. So I highly recommend going back to the old-fashioned books that you can turn, not just Kindle, all right? You know, you don't have to worry about glare if you're turning the page, and use those as well. But I as an HBCU grad, I did learn from Black people. You know what I'm saying? I mean, even though FAMU was founded by, you know, we could talk about the bullshit about them.
A lot of them, by the way. A lot of them. Like, we do know that a lot of the major HBCU colleges are either funded or
here's what I think where we get in a lot of trouble though. One thing y'all are saying is we have to teach ourselves. And I think that one of the reasons why there's such disarray and discord between the races is because we are teaching ourselves. A lot of stuff going on in critical race theory, Black people already know these are kitchen table topics, but they're not being taught to the other side, so they are completely oblivious. So when we bring up things like the stuff that's happening that happened in our history, like what the fuck you talking about? Get over it. We're like, nah, that's what I grew up being taught. That's all I know. You know what I'm saying? So it's not just teaching ourselves, it's force feeding it, and that's why the critical race theory, in my opinion, especially the 1619 project, is so important.
Anybody want to talk about that?
No, I agree. Just in general, I agree with that. I think that in order to make actual change, people are going to have to reckon with these truths, and that includes people in power. And it's one of the reasons why you have such a like rabid group of people who are fighting against critical race theory, even though the vast majority of them don't understand what it's even about. They just think it's some divisive way to make white people feel bad. But you know, it's they need to know this. We need to know this, and it points directly to things that should change and things that could change with the right kind of legislation and the right kind of decision making. But you know that then you get into the argument of like incremental change and whether it's going to be even, you know, is that going to be enough to get us to a point of equality or equity, you know, that kind of thing. Which is a whole other argument, you know, and you start moving more and more to the left and more into like more radical ideas, which is scary for some people. The other alternative is the status quo, and every now and again, you know, we get a new holiday or something.
Wow. Yo, I will say that anytime you bring up race, white folks gonna be big butt hurt unless it's NASCAR. Race is a touchy subject for white folks, period, because they don't adhere to the generational trauma that we all on this panel have experienced, you know, either through our own parents, either through our own, genealogy, or even through the books or the videos that we've watched. Even just that if you could put up that picture one more time on the screen of the Black folks, there's a certain way we feel when we see this, and there's a different way that they feel when they see this. And this is why critical race theory, I think, is important, because we need to make sure that just because we feel a certain way and they don't, doesn't mean that we should not all be educated on what it is that we feel and what we have to go through in this time.
I think that's, you bring up an important point.
I'm all for the critical race theory. I'm all for it, but I think it's, like I said, I think it's going to be a control of the narrative. You know, they're still going to do exactly what they've been doing. And not they, I'm sorry, the power structure, you know, and
so
we're still going to miss a lot.
It sounds like
we have been teaching.
Sorry, it sounds like your problem is with a white structure teaching critical race theory. Like when you say they're going to control the narrative, it's if the people in power right now are those oppressing us, how can we trust them?
We don't control the education.
Yeah, I think you answered.
We don't control the education. They do.
Yeah, well, you're right about that.
So, what is the alternative to trying to, like, what do we do instead? Well, that was my question from earlier. Is like, what do we do instead? Because we can't just say, hey,
like I was saying, like Vince was saying, you know, we teach our own kids, but there's still information that we don't have. We don't search for. We don't look for. You know, a lot of us are too busy in the day to day. You know, life beating us up. You know, we growing our kids up instead of raising them. You know, we having those kind of issues. You know, a lot of single parent homes. You know, mama and the kids as friends. You know, we got those kind of dichotomies. We got those kind of, you know, situations going on. So a lot of us are getting lost. You know, a lot more of us are starting to be what I don't like to use the word woke, but
a lot more of us are starting to wake up. But as a whole, as our people, a lot of us is being lost and will be lost. They're gonna fall to the wayside.
And
because people, honestly, if this don't make them a couple dollars, if it don't make them a couple dollars, they really don't want to have nothing to do with it.
And Deshion, to that point, it's a lot of our people are comfortable being lost. They're like, there's no, there's nothing that makes them uncomfortable about being in the situation that they're in. Like, and this is why I think these type of conversations are very important. And again,
it's social engineering.
I agree with everybody on the panel. I want that to be very clear about critical race theory, about critical race theory being added into the curriculum in schools. However, I do want my opinion is that if you're going to tap into critical race theory without tapping into the whole of the Black experience, which is not just the slave side of it, that part for me is irresponsible, because we as Black people believe a lot of the stuff that we've seen. Like I brought this up. I've said this to you, Vince. I've said this to you, Holly. We saw Beetlejuice. We all saw Beetlejuice. We all saw the witch doctor sprinkle some stuff onto Beetlejuice's head and it shrink up. And there are people to this day that think that is something that goes on in Africa. Just like also, here's a fun fact for you. People call the relationships, some people call the relationships between a Black and a white person jungle fever. Well, truth be told, and this is a fact, Africa has less jungle than any other continent comparable with its land space. So when you think about that and you relate that to how people envision Africa as being this jungle territory and all of this, you know what I'm saying? It's more prairie land, more just open spaces of land in Africa than there are in, say, Brazil, which is way more jungle oriented than Africa. And these are facts that you can look up.
Yeah, but according to you, bro, Blacks were in America anyway, so that makes Black, you could be jungle fever because Brazil is Black people, right? I mean, I was just saying, like, there's so many different ways to slice and dice.
I hate when you divert because I said pertaining to Africa, and then you say
stop talking about Africa, because Africa it only defines where we came from. According to what we started the show with, Africa is just the beginning, but we are globally present. So it doesn't matter whether or not Africa was a certain plane, because we were in Brazil just as deep, according to what we started the show with. But I will say, Nicole Hannah Jones, if I'm not mistaken, that's her name. Is that her name? Nicole Hannah Jones. She's the one who orchestrated and single-handedly over the course of her life's work to put together this 1619 project. Now, I do know that our history, as I said in the beginning, did not start with slavery. It was interrupted by it. But this is an attempt to show those who've had the blind eye, who've purposely turned their heads and their kids' heads against the plight of Black Americans since the transatlantic slave trade, to be more informed as to the Black experience. And that's a Black woman who actually orchestrated this along with other Blacks. And we can look that up. Now, it doesn't make it better because she does work for the New York Times, and we know that that's not a Black publication. All right. So we know that somewhere there's
not to cut y'all off. Yo, this is a beautiful time. I enjoyed y'all, man, but I got to get back to work. I gotta bounce, man. I gotta make that bread. Life is happening.
Okay, all right, fine.
All right, man. You take it easy.
Y'all be easy, man. Yeah, right.
Good to meet you, Deshion. Good to meet you, bro.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too, man. Y'all be easy.
Go ahead.
Deshion can't sit still, can he?
I mean, he's at work, man.
Hey, y'all. Hey, so
supervisor probably done came in there 2 times. Like, hey, you still on break? You still on break, man?
I hope that's a Black-owned business. That's all I got to say, because he's sitting there like these white people.
That's probably why he was using code. They.
Yeah, they. We were like, who they? Who? He's like, you know
people that write my check.
You know what's going on. We put him on the spot though. But yo, I gotta follow Deshion because I do got to get up out of here too. But my God, can we get a part 2 on this, bro?
Yes,
Like, can we come back to this?
Part 2. I don't feel like we just scratched the surface with this.
Hell yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I, when we come back, we'll have more actual, historical research and resources to tap into, and hopefully they will not come off of a fake page or somebody's made up site. But ultimately, and you know what, we can probably wrap this up for today as well. But I think it's very important for us as Black people to be more proactive in the search for truth. It is definitely I think pointing fingers at white people, as we've seen for years and years and years, has not worked. So the idea that because you put it in a we've had comments where people are like, I'm taking my kids out of school. Okay, cool. You know what I'm saying? But there is a big pushback for the critical race theory to be administered into the curriculums. And we don't know if that's going to happen or not. But if it does, I would like to see Black people not feel inferior after seeing themselves chained, whipped, subjected to all of the turmoil that they went through, that we went through as a culture, but not to think that is all that our existence is based on. Is always being perceived as inferior and less than, and that's kind of the dynamic that I would love to see us as Black people take the initiative to start looking and delving deeper into our history, Black history, African history, all the things that encompass it. So I want to give everybody.
Let me ask you this: does that include our ills? Does that include things that we did poorly, badly? Does that also include things that we messed up? Because when we talk about history, what we're doing right now, I'm sorry, my bad. Now you were wrapping up, and I did that thing.
No, but that's cool. It's cool. Go ahead. I want to hear what you got to say.
I'm just saying, like, it's one thing that I've discovered in my old age now is that typically we tend to shine the light on what's most admirable about our history, right? We don't tend to talk about the messed up parts of history in general. You read the history books about Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson, you're going to hear too much about how he raped those slaves. You're going to hear about how he was a great president. But the same thing happens with our culture. We don't hear about Martin Luther King's trials with the white women, which are on tape. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to, I'm just saying that the belief system that I have landed on in my old age now is one that allows you to take the good with the bad in that yin yang sign. And it does not excuse the bad, but it accepts the possibility that it had to exist in order for the good to exist as well. So when we talk about looking at our history, we might find some instances in which some of our tribes burnt down others of our tribes. If you look at the turmoil between the Tutsis right now, going on over there on the west coast on the east coast of Africa, like that's 100%. It's like a 99% population Black that are killing each other right now as we speak. Now I know we're talking history, but I'm just saying, like, as we speak about our history, do we simply glorify ourselves, or do we also include that ugly travesty history that we like to shove in white folks' face to ourselves as well, to make sure that we can stop letting cities like LA, St. Louis, Chicago, Brick City, even parts of Miami that exist that have a high, death rate when it comes to our communities against each other, is all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, to answer your question, I think anytime because one of the things that we didn't really tap into, what we did is history, or is it his story? And his story means it comes from the mouth of whoever at that time is writing or determining what the history is going to be. So whatever the writers determine in history, as far as like we'll implement this or we'll exclude this, I think that's historically what history is. History has always been who's writing it. Let's talk about the person who's writing it. So yes. So again, we first have to acknowledge our history and then determine, what it is that thing. I think I've done a lot of research this week, so I know that there were slaves as it pertains to Africans. We did have slaves from other tribes that were conquered and so on and so forth. I don't think the travesties that were necessarily that happened in the U.S. happened in the African civilization, because we have two different personalities when it comes to savagery and when it comes to how one treats another person. When you start talking about the Tutsis, that's later in history, and that's also after the colonization of, and people have come in and kind of changed the original.
You're doing that thing though. You're doing that thing where you're excusing it. You know what I'm saying?
Not excusing it.
Now, don't get me wrong.
I'm giving.
Maybe you're not. 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 You're right. You're right. But all I'm saying is, listen. I think that we have solidified the fact that for Black folks, racism trumps all else. All right. Like, I could go outside, shoot another dude in his head that looks just like me. It won't make headline news. But if I'm a white dude, especially if I got on a uniform, that's going to cause a lot. Now, I'm the guy, as you know, Ty, that's going to show up, march at that deputy's house, probably try to burn it down. I'm going to be there with city council. I'm going to galvanize the locals. We're going to sit there. We're going to sit and march until this dude's career is over and then he ends up getting convicted. But at the same time, during that march, during that fight, there are going to be multiple 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old innocent bystanders that are going to die. And I just want to see if it's us not including that ugly aspects of our history that is allowing for those social atrocities to exist today. Even if the Tutsis did exist later on after colonization, it still exists in all Black countries. You know what I'm saying? Haiti, there are a lot of things that we have to address that unfortunately were rooted in racism, but the racist aspect does not actually solve that issue. So I don't know. I'm babbling on a little bit right now because I like y'all.
This is why we had the conversation, man, to get some of this stuff out. And like, again, we're gonna have a part 2. We're gonna come back. We're gonna talk about all of these different things. But I really appreciate everybody's comments and dialogue. And Holly, thank you for bringing facts to the table while we sit back here and argue all of the semantics.
It's okay, guys.
But great. I want to go ahead and go around the table, Vince. I know you got to get out here, so I'll let you go first. Tell everybody where they can meet you, what you got going on. You got a show tonight. Go ahead and put that on blast.
Yeah, y'all can follow me online at $ Vinny St. Louis on Cash App. You know what I'm saying? That's where most of my best work is. And feel free to donate while you're there. This Saturday, I'm gonna be on the New Blurred Order, this cool ass podcast that 2 people on this show may, and maybe who knows, maybe 3 may join us one day. And since I'm in town, I get to see the Eternals tomorrow. So I definitely hope that y'all will check that out. But most importantly, check us there on MulTYverse every Wednesday, 6:30 Eastern time.
Oh, Vinny, I didn't even know you was gonna be in town for the Eternals. I would have.
Yeah, I'm in town, bro. I'm on land.
I see you now. Now I see you. I see you, man. Thank God we build ships. Nah, man. Go ahead, Holly. I'll let you go ahead.
Speaking of the slave trade, Mr. House.
You can find me at So Please Understand on YouTube, where you can find all Black stories and interviews that I do, and talk about Black history on my channel, and at Holly Noon on Instagram. And again, check us out every Wednesday at 6:30 on Facebook and YouTube Live, and subscribe to our channel and like our Facebook page. See you guys next Wednesday.
All righty. Tyrone.
What's up? Yeah, you catch me on Wednesday at 6:30 for MulTYversed as usual. Saturday morning for the New Blurred Order. Can't wait to do that. Watch Eternals. Watch Harder They Fall. We're gonna have some fun with those. And real quick, I just want to take this opportunity to say, if you're not already watching The Wonder Years, the remake of The Wonder Years, I know this sounds ridiculous, but you need to start watching that show. You, your kids, your people, everybody needs to watch the show. It's a great show. It's Black excellence. It's Black joy. It's real. Like it just is real depictions of the experience. And I think that I think it's something that we should be celebrating and propping up. And that's all I have.
Yes.
Catch it.
Yes.
On
and War Machine is in it.
Yeah, Don Cheadle narrates it, and he kills it. He kills it.
I love how you just called Don Cheadle War Machine on another show. But that's what's up. I'm a man of few words, but I want to make sure this is very clear. Educating our young Black youth is imperative to where we go from here. There's a lot of things going on out of our control, but the one thing that we can control as parents, as elders, as Black sisters, brothers, mothers, fathers, cousins, all of that, is we have the ability to use the resources that we have been given. And if you don't take those opportunities to use these resources and continue to allow these social constructs to rule over your lives, then you will continue to be under the same bondage and under the same rules and regulations that have really messed Black people up for years and years and years. We cannot depend on anything outside of ourselves to be our true selves and learn about our true selves. So take those opportunities to delve deeper, to find truths, and always be vigilant in that. So with that being said, I always like to let Bernie take us on out, and there ain't nothing changed. So I'll let Bernie take us on out, and we'll get up out of here.
Boy, just be yourself. If people don't like it if you're being yourself, fuck them. Let me tell you something. I used to go with a girl when I was about your age. I tried to please her peppy all the time. Went out my way to please her peppy. I come in one day, I said, nice weather we having. Said, you can't say that. You can't say that, it might rain. I said, nice tie you got on. Said, you can't say that. My wife tried to choke me with it. Point I'm trying to tell you, son, is be yourself. People don't like how you be yourself, fuck them. Fuck them up against the wall. Wear handcuffs on them and crazy through on their lips. That's all you do.
Words to live by.
You live by them, son.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the club now, Uncle Vester, and just go.
You go and enjoy yourself, boy.
So on my behalf, Tyrone, Thornhill, Holly Noon, to my guests, the real Vince Taylor, Deshion Brown, thank you. We are out. And that's a